Hi guys from Double Read. I am double checking my what I read, and yeah, it's gonna do April. I'm gonna do the April wrap up. I will talk about the books we read in the book club, but I will show somewhere. I don't know. Probably I can do some editing and I can split the reviews into sections, and then after each review of the book, a cover will show up, and I'll also put in the description the books I read from April to May because I know I'm doing this almost the end of May, but I stopped reading last 3 days because I'm heading up to Mexico. So by the time you guys see this, I'll be in Mexico. Yay! So I'm going to talk about the books I read in April and May as two separate videos, just because you guys have so many people who want to talk about things that I'm going to do them wrap up here, and that's it. There is, I don't, from what I'm looking at, double check. There is no book that I'm I have to tell you guys out in public. Actually, no, there is one. There's one book that I will talk to you guys in the group because it's two books. Two books that I need to talk to you as a group because I want to hear you guys reaction towards it because it's a unique and interesting story. So let's get started. April's wrap up. You're probably wondering, why are you splitting them into two videos? I read 17 books April and 25 books May, so I need to separate them because there are too many books to talk about. So, The Family Outing is a book in which, during quarantine, this young woman decides to interview her mom, her dad, and her sister, I think it's older sister, and younger brother. She's the middle child, I believe. Don't remember. About how they came out to the world. Her father came out as gay, her sister came out as bisexual, her brother came out as trans, she came out as a lesbian, and her mother came out of a survivor. So it's really fascinating how they explore that outing journey. And it's super interesting, especially during this still period where all of them were stuck at home, having to deal with their life choices. Is really interesting and fascinating. The divorce colony. Okay, this is an interesting historical piece of writing. A lot of it's women history that I picked up from the stations from Women History Month. And the divorce colony was one of them. I need to read this, and it's about the time period in the U.S. history where there was no such thing as a divorce, and it was very much a legal process. But there was a city in the state that was much easier to get divorced. The biggest hurdle these women had to deal with to get divorced was by becoming residents of the state. And you had to stay in the state for 5 months or something to be considered resident. And once they were residents, it would be much more easier for them to get divorced. And so you meet these women who actually went through the process and how the town took them and how they view these women. And these women are actually pretty rich, so it's an interesting story to hear how they got divorced and why they got divorced and how the town saw them as divorcees. So that's interesting. Expect Great Things by Vanda Krefft is about kind of a certification school during the I can't remember the time period. But basically, during the time period where schooling wasn't considered still opening and available for women, after losing her husband, this woman decided to start kind of these trade schools to train women into becoming secretaries. And it's really good and really fascinating, and it also explains the fashion of the era, the businesswoman era, why they would wear hats and why are they dressed this way. It's literally because they were being trained in this trade school, and they would learn how to speak for themselves, how to demand fair wages for themselves. It's a fascinating read for a schooling that is no longer exists and is kind of an era of this time period. So it's very fascinating. Highly recommend reading it. Come Fly the World is a story on the history of flight attendants. It's super fascinating because a lot of these women that started off joining as flight attendants, especially the ones we're listening to, were in fields of science. They were highly educated women, but they saw the limitation of those schoolings, that their careers couldn't go more further because of the limitations they had. So they would end up working as flight attendants. And it's super fascinating and interesting because, like, there's some of these women have, like, master's degrees in biology and science and on it. They're very highly educated women, which becomes a problem when a lot of the airlines highly sexualize them. But it's not just like, oh, the glamour of being a flight attendant, because the airline we are following is one of the first airline that not only traveled internationally, but also worked with the U.S. military during the Vietnam War. So a lot of these women would take recruits going to Vietnam and also taking the vets from Vietnam back to the U.S. and they would see how shell-shocked and how the war affected them. And then once Vietnam closed down, the travesty of the war. There's a chapter specifically on these flight attendants having to take care of babies and children that they're getting out of Vietnam to the U.S. They have, like, adopted parents ready for them and all the legal dynamic and issues with that process. So it's super fascinating, super interesting. They also talk about hijacking, which you don't think now as often, because after the events of 9/11, but even before 9/11, hijacking in planes was a huge issue. There's a discussion of these flight attendants who went into the middle of the country and they had these really important people and they get taken out of the plane because apparently they're wanted by the government or something. I don't recall. And so it's a really human approach to that historical element. And it talks about these women and their career choices and how much they love the airline and whatnot. It's super fascinating, super interesting. I highly recommend it. So I'm going to talk about a book that I kind of didn't really enjoy the month of April, but I need to talk about it because it actually was well written. I just didn't like the main character. Kissed Sarah Wheeler is about this girl who is raised by lesbian mothers and has lived this small town in a red state. And so there's a ton of homophobia and a ton of, like, religious fright, especially because she's in a religious institution, like she's in a religious high school. And so she has this rival who she hates so much, and she's going to try, like, beat her in everything. And then one day during prom, like, I don't remember, like in a party or something, she kisses her, and then the next day, Sarah Wheeler is gone, and she gets this note, and so she meets with her neighbor and her boyfriend, and they're trying to find her, and this girl is like, I hate Sarah Wheeler, I hate her so much, and I'm like, I hate you too, you're so annoying and bratty, and I'm like, I have to remind myself, like, this is a teenager, why do I hate this teenager so much? But I hate this teenager so much, and I just hate every decision she makes. But, and here's the reason why I actually have to recommend it, but she believes she's making the right choices, which I'm like, that is such a high schooler thing to do, that I kind of like the fact that you're so willing to make an unlikable character, but make it so they are fully aware that they're unlikable, and they have to, like, prove that they're making right choices, that these are correct choices, and that the choices they're making aren't something that someone else is pushing on them, that they're making these choices on their own. And for that, I kind of have to give it credit. But it's just a character. It's not a character that I would like to read, but I read in April. What Monstrous thought. Apparently it's supposed to be a very Sleeping Beauty kind of story, but I don't see it. It's about this girl who has been trained and raised to save these royal families that have been cursed by a wizard to fall asleep. And she saves them, like, yay! Except now she has to get married to the prince. And that's the thing. She's not given a choice. She has to get married. But she also has to help the royal family awaken the gods of the world, and the reason why the country is dismayed, which is the reason why they have to awaken the royal family, is that the gods have abandoned them. the only connection they connect with gods is through the royal family. And the royal family is the only way to make saints have that connection to the gods. And she's like, okay, I'll do it. I'll have to go through the country and connect them with gods and like cure people that are dying from the plague. There's a plague and they're killing all people. And she's like, I met the temple in which is the church that I was raised in after my parents had died from the plague, and I gotta connect with the goddess. And the goddess went like, I hate you. And she's like, what the heck? And she's finding all the gods are not what she thought they were. And it's making it very difficult for her to love. It's a good read. But I do not get the whole, like, it's like Sleeping Beauty, because it doesn't feel like it. It feels its own unique thing. And the wizard she ends up killing, in the start of it, this isn't a spoiler, it's literally the start of the book, is haunting her, and maybe the only way she doesn't end up dying, because she may not be what the royal family wants. And if the royal family doesn't like you, they're willing to kill her for the greater good. You know, their sense of power. American Girl. Yes, there's a book called American Girl by Wendy Walker that I read. And it is weird and strange, and I don't really get it, but I enjoyed it. It's about this girl who is on the spectrum, autism spectrum, who has to deal with a murder happening in her job, and how she has a detective who is trying to convince her to do the right thing, and that she knows more that she's willing to tell them. Which is true, but the way they explore, I like the way they explore how she sees the world. The mystery itself isn't really clear. I don't really like the mystery and how it's solved, but the way she is seen as someone with autism is very nice. It's a very well written character on the spectrum. All We Were Promised! Okay, this, I won't say this is my favorite book of the month of April, because that is going to have to go to two other books that I read. All We Were Promised is about these three young women who are living in Philadelphia. One of them is a runaway slave who has to pretend to still be a slave to her father, who is white passing. So he gets to like be free and have like trade and whatnot and get a job and stuff. But she is herself is still she's not a slave, she's a servant and a freed woman. But the runaway slave has a friend that she kind of like just abandoned in the, it's called plantation. I can't remember plantation. And guess who showed up? Her best friend, who is still a slave and is being taken to Philadelphia because her mistress, is trying to get married to someone in Philadelphia. And it's how while Philadelphia is a free state, they're still not given all the freedom they were promised. So that's what the title is. All We Were Promised. Philadelphia promised to be a free state, and like once you're there, you would have a sense of freedom, you have like a sense of like equality and independence, and it's not. And a lot of what the freed woman, she was free, she's like, what was born free and whatnot. Issue is that she feels that while she has an organization and a group of people who are willing to fight for the freedom of slaves, there's still a lot of racists that will attack them. And in fact, during the first chapter, you get to see a guy, someone going for the freedom of black people, of slaves. Get this really impassioned speech, and a bunch of racists just attacks them all. And that's the introduction of the book. Sisters in Science is about the women in science that were born or raised throughout Europe and were trying to find ways to escape during the Nazi regime. And it was much more difficult for women scientists to escape because they weren't given as much credit as male scientists. And so it describes how they had to try to get to the United States and the difficulties they had into adapting and being a part of the U.S. and how different it was in the culture shock. So that's really fascinating, and how it was really frustrating for these women who were considered very much overly qualified in Europe. How they were overqualified and they weren't even respected for their overqualifications in the United States. So it's really something interesting. If I Have to Be Haunted. is an interesting story about, like, family trauma. It's about a young girl who is a ghost speaker. Her grandmother has spoken to ghosts, and she can speak to ghosts, which is cool, because, like, her grandma's a really cool mentor. Except for the fact that her grandma's dead. And so she has a ghost mentor. So one day, she has to team up and work with her arch rival. And she's like, great, can't wait to do this. And so she goes up to the meeting, and he finds him dead. And he is being bit by a snake that can cause the end of the world. But if she goes on this great journey, there is a possibility that she can bring him back to life. And so that's the whole series of events. It's her having to deal with kind of the curse that her grandmother gave her, and the fact that her mother doesn't want to talk about her grandmother, her own mother, because she was a very abusive mother. And the fact that she has to team up with her rival, and the fact that her rival's parents don't really care about him. Literally, they hide the body. He isn't declared missing or anything, which is kind of like, my gosh, your parents do suck. So that's super interesting. But it isn't my favorite read of the month. And that's, I can tell you what my favorite read of the month. The City of Thieves is, if not, one of the most uniquest ways to, like, retell history that I've read, ever read. I'm going to say it's ever read, as of right now. But it's written so well that I love it even more. So The City of Thieves is kind of a retelling of the author's grandfather's story of living in Russia during World War II. And that he found a dead Nazi, and that he stole a knife of the Nazi. He got told by the Red Army, you stole from the state. And he's like, what? And he's like, yeah, you stole from the state, and we're going to have to arrest you, and you're going to be put to death. Unless you and this defector, who was another gentleman who ran away from the Red Army, find a dozen chicken for the general's daughter's wedding cake. And that's the story. It's them looking for these dozen eggs in the middle of the frozen winter in Russia. And it's delightful, and it really brings the small town to life and what they're willing to do to save their life. And it's a really interesting read. The Cure of Women, which is about women history, especially when it comes to, like, women's health. So it's really interesting and fascinating. Also, The Women in White Coats is also another story on women in the history of medicine. And it's super fascinating, interesting, and I highly recommend it. The Nightmare Before Christmas is a queer holiday story where Cole, that's his actual name, because he wanted to get into the Christmas holiday, and he was, like, getting ready as the Christmas prince, because every holiday has an empire and royal families and whatnot. And he was, like, given a lot of, like, credits and start becoming the next Santa Claus. Decides to make every kid's dream come true in a small little country, thinking nothing would happen, and then he destroyed the whole economy of this country, and he's like, what the freak did I do? And he's like, it's the president of our, and he meets the Halloween prince, but he doesn't know that, and he's about to celebrate Christmas when his dad tells him that he's going to get married to the daughter of Easter, who's his best friend, Iris, because he broke off the engagement to the actual Easter princess, so he has to get married to her younger sister. And then the Prince of Halloween shows up. It's like, no, we know what you're doing. You're monopolizing the holidays. We're not gonna do it. It's fine. It's good. But I like Monster Holiday better. Because, like, it doesn't really give us how these kingdoms were built, and how did Santa get built. Even though we get this, like, retelling where he studied a lot of this history, we don't get the history behind it, which is disappointing, is that? Because in Monster Holidays, we get the telling of, like, yeah, Christmas was built because they were dragons, and they were extinct, and, they were using traditions of their own culture, and they brought it here, and that kind of became Christmas, and it's kind of cool. But it's fine. I like the characters. They're believable, they're breathable, they have, like, wants and desires, and they have, like, you can tell them, you could say, like, Cole loves the traditions of Christmas, and loves the joy of Christmas, and likes making people happy. Which is something you Like, bad characters you can't deal with. So there's that, but it's just, I think Monster Holiday did it a little better. And finally, my second favorite book of April is Only She Came Back, in which this kind of amateur true crimeist has a true crime right next door. There was a classmate that she met while she was in middle school that she kind of has a softness towards. You know, I gotta do the collage at the end, but I did put wits in it. I don't know why I forgot to put that in Storygraph. But anyways, true crimeist. Before I get true crimeist. And her classmates has just gone to like the middle of nowhere with her boyfriend. Except she's the only one that showed up. Her boyfriend is missing. Like, nobody knows where her boyfriend is, but she's the only one that came back. So there's a lot of questions of like, why is she the only one here? What happened to the boyfriend? Where is the boyfriend? Did she kill the boyfriend? We don't know. It's really interesting, and there's a lot of plot twists. I really love it. It's a very interesting commentary on the manosphere, in a way. I would recommend it, just to get an understanding of the manosphere is. They don't say it's a manosphere, but they talk. Her boyfriend is in the manosphere. It's interesting. I recommend it. So yeah, those are my reads of April. Gonna make another video of my reads for May, because again, I read 25 books. 25 books. And this video, without the editing, is already 25 minutes long. So I'm going to talk about books of May in a separate video, and I'm gonna show you the collage in the beginning of the video and the end of the video so you can see it, and I will also put the descriptions and the information of the books I read this month at the description. Catch you in the next video.